Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Dubois with the Noblesville Chamber. I want to welcome you all here and thank you for joining us. It's a good crowd, and I know there's folks at home watching courtesy of Hamilton County Television, but we really appreciate your attendance here today. My role here today is to do some of the housekeeping, let you know there are restrooms out in the hallway. We do have emergency exits should you need there, and I think that covers all my legal requirements, right? So we think. Patrick Probst, the senior pastor at Faith Community Church, has been with us for all three of our sessions. He's done a fine job, and we thank you for facilitating our conversation here. We don't want to call him a moderator. He's our facilitator of the conversation, along with our fine panel. But Patrick is back from a recent vacation with his wife, celebrating her 40th. Can I say that 40th
early
birthday?
40th.
Early 40th birthday. So he's well rested to handle this tough job tonight. But we thank you for your leadership in helping moving things along. You've done a nice job the past two, so we know tonight will be equally the same. If you really want to see Patrick in action, you could join him at Faith Community Church, probably on a Sunday, and catch one of his good sermons.
We got a big week coming up in a couple weeks.
Is there a big week coming up?
Yeah, just a little thing.
So, but again, thank you so much. This is a very important decision that we're going to make in just a few weeks here, and then perhaps again in November. And so your willingness to come out and learn a little bit more about these candidates, we appreciate as the Chamber and taxpayers. We also want to say that we do this in partnership with the League of Women Voters. They're the ones that help make sure that we do this in a very fair way, one that meets their standards as well. And so we thank the League of Women Voters for partnering with our series here tonight. So Patrick, I'm going to leave it to you for the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Bob. Well, welcome to the final mayoral candidates conversation. Glad to have you out tonight on such a beautiful evening. Actually, the only reason I'm here is because everyone else kept telling Bob no. So let's see. Please stick to the script. Do not add your comments about swimsuits or wrestling or whatever else. Begin with opening statement while smiling. On behalf of Hamilton County League of Women Voters and Noblesville Chamber, thank you for attending. I'm Patrick Probst, your conversation facilitator this evening. Look up at audience for 2 seconds and smile. Just kidding. We are here tonight to learn from the candidates in this final vision and leadership of the city as we move into this. So to help me out tonight, we'd like to ask you, please just take a moment, and if you would reach underneath your chairs, just really quick, just go ahead and reach underneath your chairs. There's nothing there. That was really for us more than anything.
I was like tempted to do it.
But if you would, make sure you silence your phones. That will help us out as we go through the conversation. This is being broadcast live across the internet. Everyone is watching this. And it will be recorded and available online later, and so it's nice to not have those distractions. We know that you're all here really because your bracket is broken and you had no reason to finish watching March Madness. As was said, this is our third and final mayoral conversation. My role is to keep things moving and hopefully provide some levity as we move into these very deep and heavy conversations on the role that is before us for these candidates. Our esteemed panelists are going to engage in the conversations with the candidates, and together the goal is to provide a sense where the residents have a chance to learn of the candidates' vision, their leadership approach, their public policy positions, and specific plans to advance our city while exercising our constitutional right while we go out and vote on May 7th. So we've segmented the conversations over the last 3 months to people and relationships, which we covered in February, to places and things, which were discussed in March, and tonight we will cover the economy and finances. The Chamber and the League have reached out to several agencies, many nonprofits, seeking questions and feedback so that we can ask the right questions. The public has been invited to submit questions online, and tonight you'll even have a chance to offer questions as you hear the conversation moving forward. There will be volunteers in the aisles to collect those and bring those up for the latter part of the conversation. The candidates tonight will be in conversation again, as I said, with the residents, but also with our panelists. And so I'd like to introduce them to you at this point. I'd like to start with Norman Burns. He's the president and the CEO of Conner Prairie Museum. He is an entrepreneurial museum and nonprofit management leader for over 32 years. He has a history of successfully developing innovative approaches and compelling visions for operating history and general museums, leading 6 museums in 3 states as the CEO. He's committed to history and preservation and has met many personal service on the boards for cultural tourism, preservation, and conservation agencies across the states. He served numerous local, state, and regional and national museum organizations, including currently the Vice Chair of the American Association for State and Local History and serves as Vice Chair of Hamilton County Tourism. Norman and his wife Sandy have been married for 34 years and have 3 grown sons and a granddaughter. Next, I'd like to introduce Jenna Stewart. She's lived in Noblesville for over 20 years. She and her husband, Doug, have 2 children. She's the former practicing attorney and currently serves as the issue advocate for the League of Women Voters in Indiana. She's a member of the Noblesville Chamber of Commerce Business Advocacy Committee, and in 2018, Jenna competed in the Mrs. Indiana America pageant with the title of Mrs. Noblesville and has used her platform to promote civic engagement. And finally, I'd like to introduce and welcome tonight Robin Phelps. She's the Executive Director of Business for the Noblesville Schools. She has an MBA and has been in school business for almost 20 years. She served Washington Township, Lawrence Township, and the Noblesville Schools with previous experience in the private sector. Although no longer a Noblesville resident, she did call Noblesville home from 1994 to 2004. Would you please give our panelists a hand? As I shared, tonight's theme is economy and finances. Questions will have an answering time from 30 to 90 seconds. I will make these determinations as the questions are asked. A timer's in the front row. It will give the candidates a 15-second warning and a stop sign that will appear when their time is up. So finally, we want to turn our attention to the candidates, Vince Baker, Julia Church-Kozicki, Mike Corbett, and Chris Jensen. On behalf of all the residents of Noblesville, I want to thank you for offering your leadership and service to the community. For me, it's been a personal pleasure to watch you guys go through this mayoral run and the candidacies that you guys have each held. I believe you guys have kept civility intact, which I appreciate. That's important for us as a, quote, smaller town, and that you guys have kept dignity in place as you tried to address the issues and share the vision and leadership. So I look forward to seeing and hearing that tonight. And with no further ado, I'm going to ask you if you would please take your 90 seconds and introduce yourself. Julia, we'll start with you.
Good evening, and thank you to the Chamber and the League for hosting this series of conversations. For the first time in a generation, we have an open contest for mayor. No incumbent, no presumptive heir, just the 4 of us who have submitted our applications. Now it is time for the citizens of Noblesville to conduct the job interview and decide who to hire as the next mayor to serve our city. Let me tell you why I am the most qualified candidate. First, I'm a Noblesville native. I chose to return here to raise my family after my economics degree at IU and my law school degree at Loyola. My husband Jeff and I have raised 2 fine young men, both Eagle Scouts. JD's at IU majoring in physics, and Josh will graduate from NHS this May. I'm an attorney, and I've spent the last 16 years as legal counsel for Sigma Kappa Sorority, a national women's organization. I'm a graduate of the Lugar Series for Excellence in Public Service, and I've been a delegate to the State Republican Convention. I'm a graduate, past board president, past dean, and distinguished alumna of the Hamilton County Leadership Academy. And most importantly, I've been a 12-year member, 3 terms, on the Noblesville School Board. During that service, we've hired 2 superintendents and made a number of difficult and important decisions for our school community. From that experience, I've learned the importance of collaboration and transparency in leadership. I commit to you I will bring that lesson to City Hall as mayor. Our citizens deserve to understand what the options are facing our community and to provide meaningful input on the issues facing us, from public safety and mental health to growth and development. As you make your hiring decision this spring, I ask that you vote for Julia Church-Kozicki for mayor on May 7th.
Thank you. Chris?
Good evening, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and to the League of Women Voters, to Robin, Jenna, Norm, and Patrick for all you've done to put on yet another great conversation here this evening about my hometown. But most importantly, thank you to you, the voters. both who are here in person or are live streaming like my wife at baseball practice. I appreciate the time that you have given tonight to invite us over the last several weeks into your home to ask me good questions about my vision for the future of Noblesville, but most importantly, allowing me to ask you questions about your vision for the future of Noblesville. By now, you probably know I'm running for mayor on 4 specific policy pillars: investing in our infrastructure, developing a strong and sustainable workforce, transforming our public safety, and enhancing and protecting our historic downtown. But tonight, we're talking about economic development and finances, which I truly believe is the backbone of this community. I am incredibly proud of my fiscal record over the past 3.5 years as a member of the City Council. Each year I have served, we have passed an honestly balanced budget. I am the only candidate on this stage tonight who has lowered your tax rate, and I've done it twice. Our future will have some difficult decisions to be made, and we need a strong leader, one who is willing to listen to ideas of the future, but also step back and implement those ideas that have been promised for decades before. As my former boss, Governor Mitch Daniels, once said, we believe it is wrong to ever take $1 from a free citizen without a very necessary public purpose, because each such taking diminishes the freedom to spend that dollar as its owners would prefer. Tonight, we talk about that dollar, and I look forward to that conversation, and I thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Chris. Mike?
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm excited about tonight's topic. Business and the incentives that help drive it are near and dear to me. And I have been vocal in front of our city council during this campaign about the misuse of these incentives. So as an introduction to tonight's forum, I'd like to set forth my position on that topic. I'm a fiscal conservative, which is a term that's tossed around a lot, so I'd like to define it. It means I believe in the free enterprise system and the value of a free market. I believe government should only get involved as a last resort, and when the market fails for some reason. The state legislature gives local communities economic tools like tax abatements and tax increment financing districts to help recruit businesses. They are powerful tools, using the good faith and credit of the entire city to get businesses to invest here. But like many well-intentioned programs, they get misused if we don't pay close attention. And that's what's happening in Noblesville. Certain well-connected businesses are getting undeserved tax breaks at the expense of other businesses, and that's wrong. This stance has led some people to label me as anti-business, but that's not true. Look at the record. I've belonged to all 4 Hamilton County Chambers of Commerce for more than 10 years. I own a business, which is a magazine that promotes business as our mission, and I've studied business extensively and earned an MBA. I'm about as pro-business as you can get, but I'm against government programs that skew the market by giving money, either directly or through tax breaks, to certain businesses, picking winners and losers, if you will, without a compelling reason that serves the public good. Once you get on that merry-go-round, it's very difficult to get off. When do you start saying no? Well, we haven't been saying no often enough, and it leads to all kinds of problems, like our residential tax rate being the 3rd highest in the county, the commercial campus that's been slow to fill up, city services that are struggling to keep up with the growing city, and it's time to change all that. So, with that background, I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Mike. Vince?
Hello, my name is Vince Baker, and I'd like to thank the League and the Chamber again for inviting us to answer questions and let you, the residents, know what our views are. I'm a 15-year employee with the City of Noblesville on the street department side. The last 3 of those years, I have held the position of urban forester. The love that I have for Noblesville, the city that I was born and raised in, made it an easy choice to become a civil servant. Throughout my duties working for the city, I have had many residents ask me questions and voice their concerns to me about the future of Noblesville. I hope on May 7th, I will be able to serve Noblesville at a higher level. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Well, let's begin tonight's discussion on economy and finances. I'm going to start with a question first. It's an easy one, a softball pitch, if you will. What was your first job? How old were you when you got it? And how much money did you make doing it? Now, this is a pay stub job, so. Vince, we'll start with you.
This job is near and dear to my heart, and I hope eventually we can have one back, but I worked at the Rainbow Roller Rink and I think I made $5.35 an hour.
Wow.
And working at the roller rink, I actually, honestly, deep in my heart, think that place is what kept me from getting into the trouble that these kids today are getting into, because they have nothing. We have a lot of kids that play the sports, and they have the Finch Creek Park, and they have all their sports complexes that they have. But we have kids that don't want to be in the sporting field. And my son is one of those. And several years ago, I asked him, I said, Mason, why don't you get out and do something? And he's like, Dad, there's nothing for us to do here. He said, we've got the bowling alley or we've got sports. That's it. So I'm hoping when and if I'm elected mayor, that we can find something to get these kids that are not on the sports end of it something to do. And the kids that are in sports something to do. We need something for the entire children of Noblesville, something to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, first job.
My first job, I grew up in the service, and when I was in junior high school, we lived in Puerto Rico, Ramey Air Force Base, Puerto Rico, and I delivered newspapers there to the folks on base.
Chris?
My first job, I worked the concession stand with my childhood best friend, Amy Rick, who's out there, at Forest Park, that concession stand out there at the pool.
And what were they paying back then?
Probably about $6.25, so.
And Julia?
My first job was carrying the Indianapolis Star up and down 9th and 10th Street, but my first job with a pay stub was working as the receptionist at Noblesville City Hall the summer after I graduated from high school.
Excellent.
Pretty sure that was maybe $4 an hour.
All right, we're going to turn to the panelists and let them start with the questions and the conversation. And we are going to start tonight's conversation with Norman.
Thank you, Patrick. Candidates in our earlier sessions that dealt with people and partnership, places and things, each of you shared several projects, especially around places in Noblesville that you would like to advance. So in the context of financing your projects, how will you prioritize each project and how it gets funded first?
90 seconds. We'll start with you, Mike.
I believe that the most urgent project that we have in downtown Noblesville is the west side of the river. It presents a terrific opportunity. I'd like to see it developed on the same scale as the east side of the river. That, I believe, is a blank slate, really. There are roads that have been designed, I believe, on the wrong scale, and so I would make that a major priority. I believe that the Levinson building, which is currently going on the east side of the river, would fit much better on the west side of the river. I'd like to see that kind of development over there. At the same time, we've developed Federal Hill Park, which is a wonderful park. I supported it. I still support it. I think it's a great amenity, but we have lots of opportunity to develop mixed-use developments around there, apartments, and we need to rework the traffic flow, as anybody who's tried to drive across Logan Street Bridge recently must realize. Beyond that, further projects that I'd like to focus on, Firestone. I believe that has been a blighted property for too long. The factory, the building has been gone for 10 years now. It's time to start focusing on that. There are ways to finance these projects that we need to start exploring. Certainly when it comes to Firestone, I believe that there are federal economic programs that we ought to be pursuing. It should be part of it is on the Superfund site. We need to clean it up, and we need to get working on that soon.
Thank you, Mike. Vince?
I have two projects, but they're the same thing. It's the traffic. We need the north and south corridor of 37 going, but more importantly, we need the east-west corridor of the Pleasant Street extension going. The first thing I would like to see done is that. I think the county and the county commissioners are on board with getting this done, and that is the first thing that I would try to accomplish, is the east-west corridor.
Thank you. Chris?
I think just like the heart of your body, the heart of your city we have to open up the arteries within our community. Vince hit it on the head. We have to focus on Pleasant Street as priority number 1, and we have to focus on State Road 37 as priority number 2. It's easy to go and rattle off all these projects, but we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to pay for it? Pleasant Street is really an all of the above approach. It's not just a Noblesville problem. It's a regional problem. It's a county problem. It's a state problem. And it's time for some real leadership on this issue. And it's not a one-size-fits-all to Pleasant Street. We're going to have to take a mixed bag of ideas. We're going to have to work with the state for funding options. We have to work with the county for funding options. Locally, we have funding through our Motor Vehicle and Highway Fund, through our local road and street fund. We have road impact fees. We have the Community Crossings Grant projects, that program that's been laid out. We have to lay out a clear and concise funding package so we can actually move that project forward that has been on our thoroughfare plan since 1995. If people cannot access our community will simply choke off. We have to continue to invest in our infrastructure, but we can't just talk about it. We have to lay out clear ways to fund it and move forward with doing it.
Julia?
We have some consistency. I think we have two projects that are critical to be prioritized. And the first is getting the access across Pleasant Street so that we continue to move traffic through our community. And I think that needs to be funded through a variety of mechanisms, including local, state, and county-wide resources. Certainly appreciate the commitment of the commissioners towards funding that bridge project, as is their responsibility. I think we also need to look at the Firestone project as we extend across Pleasant Street and looking to federal dollars and state dollars to incentivize that remediation so that that property can be utilized for increased property values in our community is a critical first step in increasing the tax base so that our citizens, our residents in individual properties are paying less of a share.
Jenna?
Good evening. How would you utilize municipal bonds to fund city projects? And the second part of the question is, under what circumstances would you consider a referendum to fund your projects or priority city projects?
We'll give 60 seconds.
Sure. I think municipal bonds are one of just the several options that we would have to lean on. We see municipal bonds being used currently within our TIF districts, where we're able to use those bonds, the increased and the assessed value of different projects, different economic development projects, to pay back the debt service on that bond. I think we have to be very careful when we look at bonding. Our job number one should be to protect the taxpayer dollar. So we have to be very, very careful with that. What was the second part of your question?
Could you explain to us, first of all, what a municipal bond is?
Sure. A municipal bond is basically a loan to pay back on a project. So when we go to build a road, we will use municipal bond, whether it be in a TIF district or whatnot, to loan that money and use the increased assessed valuation of that area to repay that debt.
Thank you. The second part was, under what circumstances would you consider a referendum to fund projects?
You know, I think we've seen recently, especially with the school system, our community become a little bit referendum out. I think we have to be very, very careful about what we use referendum for. It is laid out by our state legislature, but we have to be very careful and very certain that we have a very clear path for all those dollars that we ever ask taxpayers to use. So I would be very, very hesitant to ever move towards a referendum unless it is of dire need to the city moving forward.
Vince?
I'm reverting back to what Chris said back at the first one. How do you word something that you totally agree with? Bonds can be a good thing, but you have to watch how you use them. And I think that the council that we have now actually takes into consideration and works with each other to make sure that we use the bonds for the right thing. As far as referendums go, I'm not a referendum guy. I mean, we have to, I feel sorry for the taxpayers that are basically on a budget every month, and then we use these referendums for, pretty much anything as long as they can get passed through. I'm not a referendum guy. I'm sorry.
Okay. Julia?
First, I think bonds should be utilized sparingly. They're effectively mortgages, and you think of bond payments back as your mortgage payment back in your household budget. So making sure that you have the funds to cover, whether through increased valuation or through our current income to make your mortgage payments are a critical first step in evaluating what you want to spend your bond payments on. In terms of referendums, I think that referendums should be used when you need to fund capital projects for a city, and they should be used sparingly, but they are the ultimate democratic opportunity for a community to decide what they want to spend their money on. And so when a majority of the citizens agree that it's a good idea, then it's appropriate to use a referendum. But I think you need to use them in cases where it is clear that that is the only choice that is available. And with the new property tax cap system, in some cases, that is the only choice that's available. So you use them when you need to.
To be clear, municipal bonds, that's not put before the voter, but
Exactly.
the referendum is.
Exactly. So when the city government chooses to fund various opportunities through bond payments, that's a decision made at the council level versus a referendum which goes to all the voters of the municipality.
Mike?
As I mentioned in my introduction, I'm a fiscal conservative. I really don't like to have any more debt than we absolutely need. However, I realize that public projects need to be funded, and sometimes we need to take on debt in order to do it. So as long as we take a conservative approach toward it, I'm perfectly fine with using municipal bonds for public projects. I cannot envision a project right now where I believe we would use a referendum.
Thank you. Robin?
Tax caps have changed the way that cities look at financing. Given these limitations, which partners in the community would be most important in accomplishing your goals?
In a tax cap situation, all of the taxing entities need to be working together to determine how best to allocate the resources. Either people are choosing to increase their debts so that we all are trying to eat at each other in the caps, and each of the taxing entities loses out in one way or another, whether that is having money cut in a bus replacement fund in schools, or whether that is having a portion of your other revenues cut in a city circumstance. So communication, careful communication between the city, between the county, between the schools, even the libraries, talking about where you need to be borrowing and when you need to be borrowing and when you need to be taxing, so that the funds come in and you're not eating at each other, but you are carefully using the resources so that you don't have to go and ask the community for more.
Vince?
That is a very tough question to answer. Tax cuts are here, or I'm sorry. I'm sorry, what was it?
Tax caps.
Thank you, tax caps, excuse me. The tax caps are here. Like Julie said, you know, we would have to work with the county, the state, you know, local governments and figure out when and when not to tax the residents, or referendums, which I'm completely against, but this is a very, very touchy, you know, subject with all residents, especially when it comes to, you know, their property taxes. I honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, I would have to talk with the local, you know, local and county governments and the state governments to figure out how we can get through this. Thank you.
Mike?
Julia's point is well taken. I think there has to be great communication. In general, I think that it's a good idea, to the extent that we are able, to institute fees for services so that people who use them actually pay for them, and we don't end up spreading it across everybody who is so that the entire community pays for something that they may not be using. So that's one answer, is to have more of a fee-based system as opposed to taxing everybody. You know, in general, I understand the principle behind the tax caps. I think it's a good one. We need to be careful about how we go about, you know, there's a greater tax burden now on rentals and businesses than there are on residences. So we just need to be careful how we spread that tax burden across the community.
Chris?
You know, in 2009, voters in the state of Indiana overwhelmingly voted in support of tax caps into our state's constitution. It's a way of protecting each individual homeowner and business owner for a higher tax going forward. I think the question here needs to be, it really needs to be a case-by-case situation. If it's a project that involves the county, our county government needs to be our number one partner. If it's a state road project or something that involves state funding, we need to work directly with our state government or federal government, et cetera. But I think there's also opportunity down the road, and I was speaking with a gentleman this week from Columbus, Indiana, that has a conglomerate of local businesses and new businesses coming to town, and they lean on them to help out with some of these projects going forward as part of their incentive going forward. I think we need to lean on local businesses who are looking to come to Noblesville to let them be a part of this project, knowing that we do have issues when it comes to the tax base. But I think it has to be a project by project answer, and all of our partners have to be at the table when appropriate.
Thank you. Norman?
The city of Noblesville has a $70 million budget. Being the president and CEO of an organization that has only a $13 million budget, I can tell you that it takes a lot of preparation to put that budget together and to manage it throughout the year. So this is a much larger budget. So the question is, how have you prepared yourself to effectively manage the city's $70 million budget?
60 seconds. Chris, you'll start.
For the past 3.5 years, I have served on the fiscal body that has managed that $71 million budget. It is a tricky budget to manage. 51% of that is public safety. So right off the top, there's police and fire. So it's very difficult every year to sit and look at department by department, line item by line item, and as I said in my opening statement, to ensure that we are spending the taxpayer dollars as wisely as possible for the greatest benefit. So I prepared myself simply by being in the seat that I'm in today as a member of the council, as someone who has served on the fiscal body that has passed an honestly balanced budget the last 3 years, and the only candidate on this stage who has lowered your tax rate, and we've done it twice. Thank you.
Mike?
Well, I would prepare for a budget the way I have prepared for budgets for years in running businesses. You talk to the people in the departments that are affected by them. I think we ought to institute zero-based budgeting. Everybody should have to account for and defend their spending every single year. We need to make sure that as we build the budget, that it makes sense, that everybody's concerns are taken into account, and live within our means. Make sure that we are not spending more than we're bringing in. I'm sure that the Noblesville city budget is an extremely complicated document, but if we keep communication open, we talk to everybody, and we keep recognize that everybody can't get everything that they want, but everybody can get most of what they need.
Vince?
I think the past administration's done a great job with the budget. I think Noblesville is going in the right direction. I think we see that out in the open with our eyes open. Like Chris said, priority one, public safety. I believe it was around 68% or 51%. I think we're doing a great job as of now. We could tweak some things, but as of right now, I think we're doing a great job.
Julie?
Over 12 years, I've served on the Noblesville School Board, which, like the city, is governmental budgeting, which is a separate beast altogether than in your regular business. But understanding different funds and how to manage them and get them to work together so that we have appropriate funds allocated to each of the areas where we need them is something we've spent a lot of time on. And we've lowered rates in years. We've had to raise rates in years depending on assessed valuation and the needs of our community. But we have worked carefully, and I've spent a lot of time understanding how that process works, and I think it is directly relevant to how city budgets work as well. I look forward to moving that knowledge forward.
Thank you. We're going to transition to questions on economic development, and Jenna's going to ask our first question in this section.
Economic development is an important job for the mayor. How would you seek to prioritize the current needs of our city while balancing the necessary moves to encourage growth?
Julia?
Economic development is what helps increase our tax evaluation so that each of us as homeowners has to pay less, and that our businesses who we want to support have the opportunity to increase our valuations across the board. So thinking about where we want to have businesses focused, I think we need to think first about redevelopment. We have a redevelopment commission that spends a lot of time on green space. I'd rather see them focusing on areas that we've already designated for business or redeveloped, such as the Firestone property. I think it's important, though, that we prioritize so that we look first to fill in the holes and to increase values of properties that are already existing, and then work on developing green space for future growth. And I think we've got to focus on businesses that bring in the jobs that our kids and grandkids want to work at.
Chris?
One of my campaign's 4 pillars is developing a strong and sustainable workforce. 10 years ago, Hamilton County was sitting at roughly 10% unemployment, and we would have simply accepted any job that would have come knocking our way or any new business that came to our city. Today, we're sitting at roughly 2.9% unemployment, and that's why I have a pillar about developing a strong and sustainable workforce. We have to be proactive in our approach to economic development. We have to go out and seek those businesses that fit the workforce needs of today, not reverse. Thank you.
Mike?
We have the third highest city tax rate in the county, as I've mentioned before, and I believe the way to help relieve some of that burden on residential homeowners is to go out and start recruiting, being more aggressive about recruiting businesses into our corporate campus. Those businesses are what will shore up the tax base to try to keep the tax rate lower for regular citizens. That would be a major priority for me.
Vince?
We do need to make sure that we have businesses that do come in, that we can lean on them a little bit more to help with our tax base. But we also need to remember, too, that we have plenty of opportunities, Hazeldale, Little Chicago, those areas like that, 146th Street, that we could put businesses and restaurants in to where we could try to keep those people from going to Westfield or Carmel and spending their tax dollars there. Let's see if we can do something to keep the tax dollars in Noblesville.
Thank you. Robin?
You've all touched on this just a little bit, but to be more specific, as mayor, what type of businesses would you seek to prioritize when drawing new organizations to Noblesville?
I'll give 30 seconds for this. Mike?
Well, of course, we want to attract industry, industry that brings good jobs that where people can make enough money so that they can afford to live in Noblesville. That would be a major priority for me. We've invested in the corporate campus. We put the infrastructure in. Let's fill that up with businesses. Beyond that, we also, I believe, need to focus on downtown and grow our downtown. We need to grow to the west side of the river. I'd love to see we have the riverfront district that is just in its very beginning stages. Now is an opportunity, a terrific opportunity, to take a look at what we can do with the riverfront and bring new businesses to downtown as well.
Thank you. Julia?
We need to be looking towards attracting light industrial, the medical technology fields that we have some already in our corporate campus, financial industry, looking at jobs that our students will want to be working in, and opportunities for increasing our tax base. Those are specific areas.
Thank you. Vince?
Again, I said in my first job, I'd like to see more businesses geared towards the children of Noblesville. I think if we could focus on them, that will be the future of Noblesville.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. As I said, I think first the conversation starts with our high school and our higher education institutions with Ivy Tech, and understand what the workforce needs are of our community currently, and go positively seek those opportunities here, and so we have jobs for the next generation of Millers. But I also think beyond that, we have to take a look at some of the recent job expansions we've seen in Noblesville. We've seen SMC and Borg Warner both expand here in Noblesville. We need to take a look at what suppliers are in conjunction with them and go seek some of them and attract them to Noblesville. And finally, we saw a great investment in blue sky technology and high-tech jobs, which I think are essential for the future of our city.
Thank you. Norman?
We've been talking about economic development, specifically about prioritizing current needs of the city as well as the type of businesses. Can you articulate, do we have 30 seconds or 60?
We'll give 60.
60 seconds. Can you articulate truly what your development plan or strategy is to really take Noblesville to that next level of business operation? So what is your business strategy or economic development plan? if you're mayor?
60
specifically?
seconds, Vince?
Quickly, my business plan would be that we need to make sure, again, I am on the youth big time. We need to make sure that we have plenty of things going for our youth so we can get them into the situations and end with the education and the jobs that they can progress on through their lives. Thank you.
Chris?
Specifically, and I'll sound like a broken record here, but I think we need to transition the city's economic development department into a workforce development department. We have to change the way we view economic development in the city of Noblesville. We have to understand the shortcomings and needs of the workforce here in this community, and we need to get proactive and go out and seek those businesses that fit the workforce needs of today. I think it's just a change from a reactive approach to a proactive approach going forward, and going and getting those businesses that fit the workforce needs of Noblesville today and into the future.
Mike?
Economic development has changed so much over the years. You know, it used to be, and many Indiana communities appreciated the fact that if you got yourself a great employer in town, everybody would follow and all the workers would come. These days, it's the employer that's looking for the workers. And so we need to build the kind of community where people want to live. And if we build a vibrant community that has the kind of amenities that people want, businesses will come in because we will have the workforce. So it's the complete opposite of the way it used to be. We need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to invest in our amenities, in our downtown, in our corporate campus, in all of our shopping areas, make sure all of our roads are top-notch. And if we do that, people will want to live here. We also need affordable housing stock. People will want to live here. And if the workforce is here, businesses will follow.
Julia?
As we look at opportunities for our citizens moving forward, we've got to start by focusing on where do we measure ourselves against other communities and use that benchmarking process to determine what our natural strengths are, which we have an abundance, and then look for the businesses that naturally align with the strengths that we have in our workforce and the opportunities that we want for our children moving forward. People today can do a lot of jobs where you don't have to work where you don't have to live where your office is. That's certainly true of a lot of people in my office. And so creating the community where people want to live while they are employed by whomever is an important strategy. And then with that, when we have a core of people who are highly qualified to work for whomever, that attracts businesses that are looking for those workers. So it is both creating a community where people want to live and feel a sense of belonging, and then attracting those businesses that want those kinds of workers.
You've mentioned workforce development, so we'll transition to some questions around that topic. Jenna, will you get us started?
Sure. Talent, workforce attraction, and retention is cited by most employers as their most pressing issue. What role will your administration play in meeting the needs of these employers? And I think this question also probably goes to the needs of those employees, maybe related to transportation to get to work. And then we're always hearing about issues with employers losing employees related to drug testing. So services for folks, local services for folks. So could you talk on that a bit?
Yeah, providing the needs for employers as well as employees for what they need and able to live in this community. Julia, we'll say 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
60.
Okay.
61 for you.
Thanks. So this goes to creating the community that has the talent pool that employers are seeking. And I think that goes to a couple things where Noblesville has some natural strengths. First, people choose Noblesville because they sense our small town values, exemplified by our square, but within the people that they meet in this community. And so we have a caring community and a lot of nonprofits that provide some resources for folks who need supports, whether that be transportation through Janus, or other support. So continuing to help as a city, supporting those nonprofits to enable our workforce to be more mobile and be supported. And then second, creating a community through the Noblesville Diversity Coalition, which I support, to make sure that all of our citizens are welcome and feel engaged and involved, and that diversity of talent will also attract employers to our community.
It's me, right?
Yes, Mike.
It sounds a little bit like you're maybe talking a little bit about a social safety net, making sure that there is that the community is able to support the people who live here so that they can be a workforce for businesses that we're trying to attract. Certainly when you talk about transportation, I'm in favor of transportation diversity. I think we need for people to be able to get around in ways that are much more diverse than cars. And that's all about trails, making sure that people can walk to places where they want to work. Once again, I guess I see this as similar to the last question, that we need to make sure that we create the kind of community where people want to live. And if we do that, we will be able to attract businesses.
Vince?
I also agree with the transportation that Mike said. I think trails are great for being able to get our workforce to and from work, but that's only going to happen in short distances. I think the Janus development shuttles that they have is another good opportunity for the business or for the people to get to other businesses. But, you know, I would always like to open it up and, you know, talk to people and see if there's other ways we can get to get these people to work.
Chris?
In terms of talent attraction and the role the city plays with prospective employers, when prospective employers enter City Hall, they should be greeted by a workforce development / economic development department. And that department is going to help them understand their workforce needs and help them understand the workforce needs that we have here in Noblesville. They're going to connect them with groups like the Hamilton County Workforce Innovation Network. They're going to connect them and show them what folks like Gaylor Electric are doing out at their facility when it comes to workforce development. They're going to connect them with the high school here as we start to talk about career pathways, and Ivy Tech as we start to talk about those career pathways. So it should be a one-stop shop within City Hall to help connect them. And then beyond that, connect them to those social services, like Janus that was mentioned here, if it is a transportation issue, like different industries that are working with our drug issue here in the community if there is a drug testing issue. But that should be a one-stop shop at City Hall within the Workforce Development and Economic Development Department.
What is the most significant challenge Noblesville City will face in the next 4 years when it comes to retaining and enhancing our city's workforce?
60 seconds. And Mike, you'll start.
I think one of the most crucial issues that we have to face is affordable housing. We've heard the term gentrification going on. I wouldn't necessarily say that gentrification has already reached Noblesville, but certainly as a community becomes more appealing to people, and in this case I'm talking specifically about the areas that are surrounding the downtown area. As people come in and they move in, they fix up their homes, prices start increasing to the point of where people can't afford to live there anymore. We have the same issue with taxes. If taxes get too high, landlords necessarily have to raise their rents. And when rents get up around $1,000, $1,200, $1,400 a month, a working class family has a difficult time maintaining those kinds of rents. So I think that's something that we really need to focus on to make sure that we have a quality housing stock that is affordable.
Chris?
I think the biggest issue that we will face in this area is economic competition. We are not just competing every day with our neighbors within Hamilton County. We are competing with neighbors in other counties and neighbors in other states and neighbors in other countries. We recently saw an expansion of SMC here in Noblesville, and I can tell you that was a competitive project, not just with folks within Indiana, but with folks within Asia as well. So we are in direct competition every day, not just for jobs. Our schools are in direct competition today for every day for teachers. We are in direct competition every single day for the best opportunities, economic opportunities, to keep them here in Noblesville long term. And I think that economic competition is our biggest threat for the city of Noblesville going forward.
I agree, Chris. Our biggest competition is economic competition, but I also want to turn it a little bit too. We need to make sure that we can get our kids educated to where when they leave the schools and get into the workforce, that they have what they need. We have we're starting to have a deficiency in construction trades and in driving trades too. So we need to try to get the industrial arts back into the schools to where these kids can actually get out and have that job.
Julia?
As we look to retain and enhance our workforce in the next 4 years, I think we first have to talk about making this a community where people want to live and stay, whether that is through the work of our Diversity Coalition, whether that is through the work of groups like Serve Noblesville, where it is a community that people are engaged and committed to. And then creating housing opportunities, creating employment opportunities where we continue to attract the businesses so that people choose to return, as I did and many of us did on this stage, to this community, because we appreciate the values here, but we want and we have employment that we find meaningful and that pays our bills. So continuing to find those employment opportunities and enhance the values of this community.
Thank you. Panelists, I'm going to no, I'm not. We're going to switch to incentives and grants. And I'm going to ask Robin if she would ask the question that she's identified earlier. This will be our last question before we transition to audience questions.
Okay. Tax abatements or tax increment financing, otherwise known as a TIF, are intended to be used to encourage economic development. It is the hope that the use of this mechanic will eventually increase the tax base for Noblesville. There are certainly circumstances when the use of a TIF is appropriate, but there are also other times when it is not appropriate. It must be decided if the development would have happened regardless of the TIF. Please tell us what factors you believe are important in making this decision and how these factors weigh in against the loss of revenue for other taxing entities such as schools and libraries.
Take 90 seconds with this. Chris, you'll start.
I think it's important to realize that tax abatement or tax phase-in is one of the biggest tools we have to be competitive in this marketplace. Every economic development opportunity that comes in front of us has to be weighed in terms of capital investment, human investment, how many jobs are created, what that long term of that company looks like. Each one is valued individually. And again, I think the best use of TIF dollars and tax abatement and incentives is when we are investing those dollars back into that area in order to grow that economic base that will ultimately buoy the entire city going forward. So it's a case-by-case basis, but it must be measured on the capital investment, the human investment, and what that company's fit long-term or an economic development opportunity looks long-term into the city's long-term forecast.
Can I do a follow-up? What is a reasonable time for the TIF to exist, and should the TIF expire?
I think there's legislation currently that requires it to expire after 30 years, and I feel that is an appropriate time frame. But again, I think each TIF needs to be evaluated on a by TIF circumstance and what the value of that TIF is bringing to the overall city.
Mike?
Yes, TIF and tax abatements are powerful tools for us to use, but I think we need to keep in mind why they're created. In general, they're created so that a community can help encourage investment in an area that wouldn't see investment otherwise, and that's that but-for argument that you're talking about. If the TIF didn't exist, would the investment happen anyway? We have to be very careful because it's so tempting for politicians to go ahead and use these tools when it's not necessarily appropriate. And I think we've been doing plenty of that. We need to be very careful that we only use TIF districts and tax abatements so that we can help encourage investment in places that the market will not invest in without a little bit of help. This idea that every time somebody wants to put an addition on their building, they're going to come before the city council and ask for an abatement, and we give it unanimously. I think we need to stop that practice. Let's use them for the practice or for the purpose that they are intended for, which is to develop property that is otherwise undevelopable. And did you want to ask follow? Oh,
The lifespan of a TIF.
the lifespan of. I'll agree with Chris on that. I mean, I think each one is individual. I don't really know how long. 30 years seems excessive to me. It seems to me that if we can get the bonds paid off that were needed to take out to develop the infrastructure and the property, that it should retire as soon as possible, so we can get the businesses on the tax rolls.
Thank you. Julia?
Certainly, TIF districts and tax abatements are useful economic tools under the appropriate circumstances. The challenge is using them carefully and then making sure that you get an appropriate return on the investment, whether that is new jobs, whether that is increased property value in our tax rolls. I think the council to date has been very generous in some of those things, and the challenge is TIF districts, which I understood were 25 years, not 30, although the statute may have extended them. They go on so long that the funds continue to accumulate and then are used in ways that were not the initial intent. Or the TIF district is slightly amended, and then the funds continue to be captured well beyond the original expiration date, all to the detriment of other taxing entities. So it is incumbent on the city to be careful when utilizing those things to make sure that the return on that investment justifies the challenges that it imposes on other taxing entities. And then it's incumbent on the city to make sure that as we offer those incentives, that we make sure that we get the return that was promised. And if we don't get the return that was promised, that we go back and ask for some clawback.
Thank you. Vince?
Finally, Patrick, a question that I've actually focused on for over 2 weeks, and you finally answered or asked it. I do agree with TIFs. I agree with tax abatements. But the thing is, with my administration and with the council, 3 main components. We need to make sure that the developer can show that the property is blighted, that the community or the city can't afford the development on our own, and the improvements that the TIF helps bring about will benefit the entire community. Finally, I have actually gotten something that I've been planning on. Thank you.
We're going to transition now to the questions that you all have asked tonight, and the panelists have received those and have sorted them out. And so who's got our first question? Norman?
I think I do. In literally all 3 sessions, I think the Firestone property has come up, and there's been a lot of different answers that have been given about that property. So as mayor, you may not have the opportunity that you do as a candidate to answer this question. As a candidate for mayor of Noblesville, if you received a multi-million-dollar grant to do whatever you wanted to with the Firestone site, what would that look like for the city of Noblesville?
Vince?
Well, I'm going to have to answer that as I'm not going to make any promises because of the situation that potentially could be found under that ground. Now, if that was completely off the table and it was fine, that is exactly what I'd use it for, is for new public safety building for the police. But we have to keep in mind that there could be issues when we start, unearthing, the ground.
Julia?
I'm going to assume that the amount of money is large enough to remediate the dirt that is currently there and then use it to support bringing development to our community, light industrial, so that we are significantly increasing the valuation of that property. Today we have ground that's covered by 4 feet of concrete because we're afraid of what's underneath it. If I had unlimited funds, I would be spending it first to fix that ground and then bring in an industrial project that supports our tax base.
Mike?
I will make the same assumption, that we have enough money to totally clean the place up and everybody is confident, because my understanding is that although I know the idea has been raised that we might move a police department there, that some of the police officers are concerned that they might end up being moved in there without it being safe. So I'm going to assume that we have cleaned it up to the point of where everybody agrees that it's safe. And if it then is a blank slate and we get to build what we want, I love the idea of putting a police department there. I think that would help invigorate that neighborhood. It's in the middle of a residential area right now, but it's sort of a transitional area between residential and retail. So as I look in my crystal ball, what I would like to see, I think we could certainly involve a beautiful park there. I would put some mixed use in there, certainly put some apartments on there, some retail. It could be a really nice community, and if Firestone foot the bill, we might call it Firestone Village.
I like that. Chris?
I would use those millions of dollars to make sure that it is a safe environment for our public safety officials. Time and time again, we've heard tonight that we do have a higher tax rate than others in the community. It's because we are the county seat. We have a lot of prime real estate, our judicial center, our hospital, that are off our tax rolls. When it comes to looking for a new place for our public safety facility, we have to look at existing ground. So I would use that millions of dollars to make sure that it is safe. I would put our public safety officials there once I have communicated with them properly to make sure that they are comfortable with that and that we are comfortable with that plan going forward. Just this past weekend, I was knocking on Division Street, folks who live right down there, and they're looking for some hope for the future. They're looking for some hope for that site. I think it is time that we go and get moving on a plan that clearly communicates the safety necessary for that site with our public safety officials, with the community, and move forward with a public safety building in that community to help revitalize that area of the city.
Thank you. Jenna?
Yes. I think sometimes people refrain from getting involved with community leadership roles or running for office because they think you have to be perfect, that we put our leaders up on a pedestal, and that they could never meet those expectations. Are you, in fact, a superhero? Will you be stepping into a phone booth and coming out wearing a cape if elected? And then tell us about, if you're not, if you're just a human and you need other people, tell us about your leadership style and how you will assemble a team and make appointments to run the business of the city.
60 seconds, Julia?
Although we have a lot of superhero things in my house with two young men, I am not a superhero. I have no cape hiding in the back. So I spend a lot of time thinking and talking about leadership, first through my Leadership Academy work, and then in the work of building young women every day. And my leadership style is having great conversations, looking for the best plan from all the multitude of ideas that I hear, and then coming up with a plan to implement those great ideas in a cohesive whole so that we move forward. And as I look at my administration, I think Noblesville has every reason to attract the best and brightest, and so we'll evaluate all of those opportunities within my administration to make sure that we're attracting outstanding people to Noblesville or within Noblesville to serve in those roles to improve our community.
Thank you. Mike?
I confess I also am not a superhero. However, I do have some powers outside of my normal powers I can't elaborate on right now, but I promise that I will use them in the position of mayor. My style is collaborative. I am not the kind of person to clean house when I go into a new venture like this. I think we have some terrific talent in Noblesville working in the city government, and I would want to retain that. There may be some people who are in the wrong seats. I believe the art of leadership management is to find people's talents, tap into them, put them in a position where they can excel, and then let them go. And that's kind of, that's always been my philosophy in business, and that would be my philosophy in government as well.
Chris?
Well, let's be honest. In the day of social media, if you want to see some flaws or assume flaws about me, just go on Facebook and spend a few minutes reading the comments. Please don't believe everything you read. No, I'm not a superhero. I am the exact opposite. But I would surround myself with a lot of great superheroes Superheroes that every day tell me no, and that's the dumbest idea they've ever heard. I want to be challenged every single day by my team. I want holes poked in every theory that I lay out so that when we leave that room, we have the best product in place to go sell to the public. And that involves not only our team, but also communicating with our city council. We've got to start communicating with one another, and so we all get on the same page. Now, I don't want a bunch of yes people around me. I want people who are going to challenge my theory, but then ultimately come up with the best product that we can take out to the people of Noblesville to take Noblesville to the next level. Thank you.
Vince?
I am nowhere close to being a superhero. I might look like one, but I'm not. I'm a firm believer in what Chris said. I want my Justice League to be people that are going to challenge me and not be a yes sir or, anything like that. We need to make sure that we focus on what's at hand. We need to make sure that I have a good relationship with the council. I want to be challenged. And I'm the type of person that if I'm going to make mistakes, but at least I'm trying.
We're going to take one final question. Robin?
This question is related to corporate campus development. And under your administration, how do you intend to drive economic development in and around corporate campus? Is land cost a concern, and will you utilize tax abatement or other incentives?
Chris? 60 seconds.
As I said in our last debate, for so many people, exit 210 is the front door to Noblesville. We have to continue to tell Noblesville's story even out at exit 210. Land prices may be an issue out there. It is in a TIF area. And I think if the right opportunity comes along, we would have to look to incentivize those folks. I'm also a small government conservative, and I believe that we should allow the free market to take its place. And we should be working with businesses to come and attract there, help them understand what sites are available. But government is not in the business of creating jobs. Government is in the business of creating an atmosphere where jobs want to grow and flourish within our community. And that's the approach I would take to the corporate campus.
Julia?
When conditions are right, businesses will come. And so we've created the infrastructure and we've created the access. And now it is time to make people aware of the opportunities, and then as it is economically appropriate for them, drive them and draw them into our community. I think we need to carefully evaluate any potential return on investment before we offer additional incentives beyond what's already been created and set up for them along 146th Street. I mean, we want to encourage development, but I don't think we need to keep giving away the farm.
Vince?
I agree also. Corporate campus is our main gateway, especially being with the 69 interstate. We need to make sure that we draw them in, but we need to make sure that our tax abatements aren't too much, aren't too little. We need to make sure that our TIF funds aren't too much, aren't too little. So again, we need to make sure that I have the right people challenging me to make sure that we do the right thing and make sure that we do what's best with the tax abatements and the TIF funds.
Mike?
Yes, the corporate campus is in a TIF district, so the city is already invested in that. I think I have no problem using economic incentives like tax abatements to lure businesses here, to give them a reason to perhaps choose us over somebody else. My preference is to not use them if we can avoid it in any way. If we build the kind of community that is so appealing that they don't have to, that is my ultimate goal. IKEA famously was not given any tax incentives to build in Fishers. If we could just change the culture where we don't have to pay businesses to come here, that would be the ultimate goal, in my opinion. I would prefer that we not be putting tax dollars out. However, I recognize that we have to live in the real world, so I'm not saying I would never do it. However, we then, once they're here, we don't keep paying them to stay here. That, to me, is a mistake.
I want to thank you for your responses. We wanted to give some additional time for you to provide closing statements, so you'll each have 5 minutes to share as much as you can to recap your statements and your platforms that you're running for and to share with those who have come out tonight. So Vince, we'll let you start tonight. You've got 5 minutes.
Patrick, I will not bore you. You know me, I'm short and sweet. I feel Noblesville's moving in the right direction when it comes to budget and finances. A big role of the mayor is to make sure that there's a good relationship with the council and to make sure that the city has the residents in their best interest. My definition of a mayor is, as head of the city, the mayor speaks for both the government and the community as a whole. I do not want to point fingers and tell people what to do. I want to ask people for their input and find the best way to solve the problems that Noblesville is facing. I want to thank again the League and the Chamber for giving the four of us the opportunity to express our views. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, I also want to thank the Chamber and the League for giving us this opportunity. I love this kind of a forum. It's wonderful and for all of you to come out and listen to what we have to say. This is truly democracy in action, and I appreciate your attendance tonight. Although finance can get complicated, it really boils down to this. Make more money than you spend and only spend what's absolutely necessary. We need to make sure we're spending our money wisely, but ultimately the answer to our high taxes is to recruit more businesses to relieve the pressure on the residential taxpayer. And once we get them here, make sure they pay their fair share of taxes. We've been far too generous with our tax abatements and other incentives. Much of that just comes down to the skill level of those doing the negotiating, and I'm afraid that we've been underperforming there for years. We have our work cut out for us. You will often hear that we don't want to be another Carmel or Fishers, and I agree, we don't. We want to have our own identity. But I wouldn't mind having Carmel's tax base. The city famously has more than 100 corporate headquarters there, and that didn't happen by accident. 25 or 30 years ago, they set out on a strategy to recruit them. They zoned and groomed the US 31 corridor and went to work. Today, they are reaping the benefits of that effort. The city tax rate is 25% lower than ours, and they are servicing a much higher debt. I would like, in 25 or 30 years, for our successors to look back and with pride and gratitude that we did the hard work now so that they can have a better life then. I was a sales manager for many years. When I first started, my reps would constantly come in to me and ask for a price break for their customers. Eventually, they stopped coming in because my answer was always the same. If you're haggling over price, you've failed to sell your value. I'm afraid that's where we are in Noblesville. We don't know how to sell the value, so everyone wants to argue over the price. We have a wonderful community here with a strong workforce, a beautiful downtown, solid infrastructure, great highway access, and many attractive amenities. We just haven't done a good enough job of selling it to enough prospective businesses. Sales is a special skill that you only develop by being in the trenches and getting good coaching. We need more and better salespeople in city government. I have the experience. I've been in the trenches for years, and I will bring a more entrepreneurial culture to City Hall. I believe I'm uniquely qualified among this group to bring some business sense to our city government. I have more business experience than anyone else up here. I've managed departments in large and small corporations. I've run my own business for 10 years. Gotten to know many of the business owners here in Noblesville. In fact, I already do business with many of them on and around our courthouse square and beyond. I belong to all the chambers of commerce in the county. I am 100% pro-business, but I want all businesses to thrive, and for that to happen, everyone needs to feel confident that it's a level playing field, that we aren't playing favorites by giving favorable tax treatment to some. I understand that public-private partnerships are the way business is done in most communities these days, and I'm not against using economic incentives to bring businesses here, and even to have them expand if the market isn't conducive to expansion for some reason. But we've got to rein in the misuse of these incentives when they don't serve a very specific public purpose. So the message under my administration will be loud and clear. Noblesville is open for business. We will streamline the process of opening a business here. Ensure that our impact and development fees are competitive with other communities. We want businesses to come to see what we have to offer and by all means build their businesses here. And so I'm asking for your vote tonight. I think it's clear that I'm a different kind of candidate. I have no designs on any political position beyond being your mayor. I chose to live in Noblesville because I saw the potential when I first moved here. I still see the potential, and I'm as frustrated as anyone that we can't seem to achieve it. I will seek to flip the current record of high taxes and low achievement to lower taxes and higher achievement. The way the political establishment has been doing business is not working. Together we can create a brighter future for Noblesville. I'm the best candidate to bring about the change Noblesville needs, and I ask for your vote on May 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Chris?
Thank you again to the Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women Voters for tonight's forum. Thank you to Patrick and Robin, Jenna, and Norm as well for helping us facilitate this wonderful conversation about my hometown. Thank you to Mike and Julia and Vince for once again joining me on stage. But again, thanks to you, the voter, for being here tonight or live streaming at home. For the past several weeks and even months, you've invited me into your home and asked me tough questions about my vision for the future of Noblesville, but more importantly, let me ask questions about what's important to you about our city. I am the best leader to lead us into our next chapter. My time spent working at local, state, and federal levels will be vital as we forge key partnerships to build an even better Noblesville. I'm proud to be endorsed in this campaign by Governor Eric Holcomb, by Congresswoman Susan Brooks, and I've earned the support of people that have built and invested in our community, and more importantly, those who keep us safe, our police officers and our firefighters. Thank you for that endorsement. My time working for in the administration of former Governor Mitch Daniels taught me the importance of a dollar and how to do more with less. And as your mayor, my top priority will be to spend your taxpayer dollars wisely. But that is not why I'm running for mayor. I'm running for mayor for 3 simple reasons. CJ, Vivian, and Hank. For my wife and me, our children are the most important people in our lives. And I'm sure that you feel the same way about your families. After I graduated Butler, it was an easy choice for me to make to return home to Noblesville. And someday my kids will face that same choice. When presented with the entire world in front of them, I want them to view Noblesville as the logical place to settle down and start their families. You see, I want my kids to grow up in a city where it's easy to get around, where you don't have to wait 20 minutes to get across the river to get to the high school for baseball practice. A city that's accessible by foot, by bike, and by car. A city that invests in its infrastructure like roads and bridges, but also invests in trails and parks because we know it's essential to moving us forward. I want my kids to grow up in a city that's safe. Not just safe from crime, but a safe community that can come together even in the face of challenges or tough conversations. A city that takes mental health and the opioid epidemic seriously by talking openly about it and finding ways to fight it. A community that equips our first responders with the tools and training they need to tackle tomorrow's challenges. I want my kids to grow up in a city that not only has good jobs available, but that is helping to build a strong and sustainable workforce. A city that has tight collaboration between our schools and our businesses to ensure that we are creating career pathways for our future generations of millers. A city that attracts the right jobs that fit the right workforce. And finally, I want my kids to grow up in a city that when they cross the White River from the west or come down our brick streets from the east, and they see our historic downtown, that they know that they are home. A city that works tirelessly to protect our historic downtown and just as tirelessly to enhance it. We are actively protecting and enhancing our downtown with an eye towards supporting our local merchants and growing our tax base. Over the past few weeks, my team and I have knocked on over 1,000 doors, talking with neighbors, listening to their concerns, and getting their ideas. And the message we are getting is clear. Our residents are ready for its next chapter. A chapter with a clear vision for the future and not just a critique of the past. a chapter that protects our history that's while working to build towards tomorrow. That's why I am running for mayor. That's why I am fighting so hard in this campaign, and that's why I would ask for your vote on May 7th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And Vince, or Julia, sorry.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and the Chamber of Commerce and our wonderful judges for hosting us this evening. And thank you all for being here, whether in person or online. This is an exciting election for our community, and it's important for us all to carefully consider the applicants for the job. I've already shared my qualifications, which make me the most experienced candidate and proven leader. I'd like to close with where I've focused my campaign. First, as mayor, I will respect our history. I grew up 2 blocks from the square, and nothing says home to me more than walking south on 9th Street towards Alexander's. The square of today is not what it was when I was delivering Girl Scout cookies or newspapers, and we can't and we don't want to wrap it in shrink wrap. But we need to ensure that as things evolve, that we don't detract from the embodiment of our hometown values, the square that draws people to our community. Second, I'm strengthening our today. To me, that means an intentional plan for our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our sewers, and that includes both how to expand it and how to pay for it. I also want to support our first responders, and that means, again, how do we provide appropriate compensation and facilities, and how do we pay for that? Part of leadership is being clear about the hard decisions. In an era of tax caps, there will be hard decisions in determining what to do and how to pay for it. I will make those choices clearly known, and I will be willing to make the hard calls. Finally, I will lead us to tomorrow. Our community has grown significantly. From when my parents moved here in 1966, when we had 5,500 people, to today when we're over 62,000. As mayor, I will work to ensure that all resident voices are heard and all citizens feel they belong. I will place the emphasis on our citizens and taxpayers, not on developers and outside interests. As I've shared before from our Noblesville Diversity Coalition, communities thrive when citizens feel a sense of love, security, and belonging. I support the efforts of our coalition, and I will make myself available in and out of City Hall so that I can hear your joys and your concerns about our city. I've started those already, and I'll be available again this Wednesday, April 10th at 5:30 at Ginger's on South 10th Street. Another part of leadership is being intentional and strategic about where and how we grow. When we use city dollars, we need to have a plan for prioritizing our expenditures and a plan on getting the best return on our investment for our city dollars. I will reinvigorate our benchmarking process to ensure we are meeting the wants and needs of our community and using the best ideas from like-sized cities as we make intentional plans for our future. We have an opportunity in this election to evaluate our processes and make sure we are being efficient with taxpayer dollars. I will take that opportunity to make sure our city is meeting the needs of our citizens. As mayor, I will be sure that any proposed development fits our community plan and is not just responding to developer interests. As you are making your hiring decision when you vote starting tomorrow, know that none of us are preordained or promised anything. The voters of Noblesville will decide who they want to have serve as the next mayor of Noblesville. I am the right woman at the right time, and as the proven leader on the ballot, I ask for your vote on May 7th.
Thank you. Just a reminder, the primaries are May 7th. You've heard it. Tonight, as well as February and March's forums, are available online. You can catch them on Hamilton County Television's website or their Facebook page. The Chamber of Commerce is going to also be inviting the candidates for City Council to their April luncheon on April 24th. You're invited to come out to that. I was told that'll also be recorded and available after the fact. Special thanks to Jim Wofford and Hamilton County Television for making this available to not only those who are able to be here, but those who are at home and to catch later on. Thank you, my neighbors and citizens of Noblesville, for coming out and supporting these forums. These conversations matter. While the primaries have not always been well attended, I hope that we do a change of course. on May 7th, and we see big numbers from the local neighbors coming out and voting. Thanks to the Noblesville Schools for offering this space. Again, thank you, Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women Voters for helping to host and put on this event. Thank you to our panelists who have helped guide the conversations and keep us on focused and on topic. And finally, thank you, candidates, for being here, for offering yourselves as servants to our community, and for bringing leadership and vision in a way that will hopefully move our city forward. Would you help me in giving them a round of applause? That is all we have for this evening. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for joining in these conversations.